Defense tends to be the hardest part of any fighting game. A lot of focus goes into offense and even neutral, but the basics of what to do on defense is not often explored. So that's where this video comes in. We're going to go over the fundamentals of defense. Yes, that means even going over how to block and what kind of mindset you should have when you're trying to figure out what your options are on defense. Let's go. When you're on defense, as in you're trying to avoid taking damage, there are three main options you can choose to do: blocking, moving, or challenging. Let's start with blocking. Strive is a hold back to block game, so that means you hold back to block high attacks, overheads, and jump-ins. You hold down back to block low and high attacks. No one direction will protect you completely, as stand blocking is susceptible to low attacks, and crouch blocking is susceptible to jump-ins and overheads. Generally speaking, you want to default to a crouch block, since jump-ins and overheads tend to be slower and thus give you more time to react. This is the standard strategy to block a character's high-low mix-up. However, there is also the left-right mix-up, where holding back depends on which side the opponent is on. With some attacks, you can visibly see the opponent move past your character, which is your signal to hold block in the other direction. But a good left-right mix-up character will make this difficult to see. Instead, this is where research and experience comes in. Characters like Millia and Slayer can make it very ambiguous as to which side and at which height they will attack. You cannot perfectly know what direction to block, or else their offense would be perfectly defensible and thus ineffective. When you get hit by a character's mix-up, that's your signal that some study is in order. More on this later. As great as blocking is, it has one other weakness: throw. You cannot block a throw. However, you can use your movement to evade a throw, or you can tech a throw. Teching a throw tends to reset the situation, so no one side has an advantage anymore. To gain an advantage, jumping and backdashing will cause the opponent to whiff their throw, while you will recover sooner. By using your movement, as in jumping or backdashing, you can evade the throw. You can also use jumping and backdashing to evade attacks. This is rather intuitive, but you can jump over a projectile or backdash out of range of an opponent's attack. Backdash also has some invulnerability, but varies by character. This is how you see some people completely dodge things like Slidehead, even though they're not holistically in the air. Do note that these options lose to a simple strike. If they don't go for a throw and simply attack, you're getting hit. So part of the risk of using these options is that you may get hit. Thus, it's important to have a good reason to use these options before you do them. Don't just move to move. Move because you have reasons to suspect they will throw you or they're attacking from a range you can back out of. Always act with intent. Lastly, there is one other thing you can do when defending: counterattacking. People refer to this as mashing or abare, but we'll be calling it challenging in this video. But what you're trying to do is hit your opponent before they hit you. This is the riskiest option, since, generally speaking, the reason you're on defense is because your opponent is at advantage. So why do it? Because the reward for being right is the highest between the three. A good challenge means you completely went from defense straight to offense. You've essentially immediately reversed the situation. So now that we know the basics of our options on defense, let's talk about when you should be looking to use each option and how to think about developing your defense. In terms of risk, blocking is your safest option. That's your default. You don't gain a lot from blocking, but you also don't risk a lot either. It also gives you an opportunity to see what your opponent is trying to do on offense. Without knowing what your opponent wants to do on offense, you cannot pick the right counter strategy on defense. So start with block and start taking note of how your opponent is attacking. What you're looking for are windows of opportunity. Eventually, there will be a gap in your opponent's offense, a window of time when you have enough time to take an action. Sometimes that gap is huge and easy to see, but other times that gap is just a handful of frames. The smaller that gap, the harder it will be to see mid-match. Some characters require more study and experience to find out where the gaps are. Once you've identified the gap, that's when you have to consider what the opponent is trying to do. Do you have enough time to challenge? Maybe you could only block. If they're trying to throw you, you have your options: tech, jump, or backdash. When you jump, don't just jump and do nothing. When you're in the air, look to see what happened on the ground. Did your opponent whiff their throw? Or maybe they're just waiting for you to come back down. From here, you can fall back down with a jump in, or you can delay your fall to throw off their anti-air timing, or you can air dash out of there altogether. It's up to you to decide what do you want from the situation. If you backdash, the options are simpler. Either your backdash was successful and you can act first, or it was unsuccessful and you got hit. In either case, you should commit to an action. If you wait to try to visually confirm your backdash worked, you may have given up your advantage. So when you backdash, commit to either continuing to block if you think they may still try something, or attack to take advantage of your successful backdash. When and how to challenge is the hardest part of defense. That's because it's the most rewarding, so it's important to learn how to do it. So let's break that specific aspect of defense down. In order to know how and when to challenge, you have to understand your opponent's offense first. I think this is best done by researching or testing out their offense outside of a match. Watch a YouTuber of your choice break it down, or ask your local streamer. Regardless, this is where you have to put in some legwork. If you want to get better at the matchup, then knowledge is the first step. You can also learn this via trial and error during a match. If you prefer to learn by just trying things out and seeing what works, then by all means, get out there and play. For some people, this is a much more fun way to learn. For others, this may be too stressful since you're trying to learn under pressure. Learn whichever way suits you. To illustrate how this process works, I'm going to use Elphelt's Rekka as an example. Personally, I like to watch someone explain it as well as use Dustloop for frame data reference, but here's an explanation as an example. Elphelt enters her Rekka using 214S. The move has a 20 frame startup and leads into her mix-up options. Up high, which is her overhead, and down low, which is a low attack. You can delay block between the low and the high, but there isn't a gap large enough to counterattack. If Elphelt stops attacking or does the follow-ups, she's at a minimum -10, punishable. She can end her Rekka safely with Nailed It being only -5, or she can reset the Rekka by using 214S again, stealing a turn. Looking at this explanation, the first thing that sticks out is the 20 frame startup upon entering the Rekka. 20 frames is a large enough gap to counterattack with a 5p or even 6p. So now I know, if I want to challenge her Rekka, I have to either do it when she's entering the Rekka, or if I think she's going to reset the pressure. If I miss that window of opportunity, then I'm better off blocking. If I'm fortunate enough to block her follow-ups, now I know I can punish her for it. If she ends the Rekka safely, I now know it's my turn, but not immediately punishable. What I hope this illustrates is the mindset you should have when looking to develop a counter strategy. The more you understand your opponent's offense, the better you can understand your options. A good video will just tell you that information, but which counterattack works for your character or what your best punish for it is, that's where you have to try to figure things out. Ultimately, when you're looking to challenge someone on offense, you're making a read. You're making an educated guess as to what your opponent is going to do, and you're choosing a counter strategy. Not all situations have a good way to counter. Just like in the Elphelt example, if you didn't challenge her when the Rekka started, you're out of luck. You missed your opportunity, and now you just gotta guess. Regardless of the defensive options you choose, be it blocking, moving, or challenging, you're inevitably going to choose the wrong option. Don't beat yourself up too hard for it. Expecting yourself to defend flawlessly is an unrealistic expectation. As you reflect and practice, you will get better at it, but you'll never be 100% right all the time. But at least by knowing your options and understanding the risk you took, you can make the adjustments to hopefully be right the next time. Though this video is rather general and only provides a framework as to what your defense should specifically be like, I hope this gives you some context as to how it works. Defense is not easy. Have I said that already? Because it's not. It takes time to learn your character, learn the opponent's offense, find the right options, and then actually do them in a match. I think I may need a part 2 to this video. My outline also talked about the system mechanics like IB and FD, but also meter and when to use it. If you're interested in that, let me know. But this framework, I hope you get an idea of how defense work, and just remember, when all else fails, please, just block, you casual.